Hi everyone, welcome back to the Fire Right Now series here from the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center at American University. As you all know, we're getting to the tail end of ARPC's Farm Bill Summer, where we've spent the last several months discussing the crucial need to turn the Farm Bill toward racial justice. That is, to recognize that thinking about questions of climate justice means thinking about questions of farm justice, land justice, food justice, racial justice, and gender justice. So today we are lucky enough to have someone here to have this conversation about gender, labor, and gender farm work and the Farm Bill, who has been an absolute leader in this movement. We have today Mily Treviño-Sauceda, who is the executive director and co-founder of Alianza Nacional de Campesinas. Alianza Nacional de Campesinas was the first national organization of campesinas working to organize together around farm worker rights in the United States. It is currently an organization an alliance made up of a number of critical organizations that Ms. Treviño-Sauceda will tell you about. Mily not only is the executive director and co-founder of Alianza Nacional de Campesinas, but she also was the co-founder of Mujeres Mexicanas in 1988, the pioneer Campesina group, and co-founded Líderes Campesinas in 1992, the first state-based farm worker women's unique grassroots organization, which has been advocating on the behalf of campesinas since 1992. Mily served as executive director of Líderes Campesinas for over 12 years, but has worked on farm worker issues for over 40 years, when she first became a member and organizer of the UFW. She's also been a crucial activist around women's issues in the state of California, nationally and internationally. In addition to her bachelor's degree in Chicano studies and her deep expertise in women's studies from Cal State Fullerton, Ms. Treviño-Sauceda has a master's degree in social science with a focus on rural development, capacity building, women's leadership, and oral history from Antioch University, and has won numerous awards for her tireless efforts in this area and her incredible organizing and movement building work, including 100 Heroines of the World from 1998, the Sister of Fire Award in 2003. Excuse me, I have a little thing there. Oops. I lost my page. The Ford Foundation and NYU Award for Leadership in a Changing World in 2004, the Cesar Chavez Legacy Award in 2015 and 2018, the Visionary Voice Award in 2019, and being selected as one of the Frederick Douglass 200 in 2019. And those of you who have been following ARPC for a while, you'll know that ARPC partnered with the Frederick Douglass family to find 200 folks who are really following through with the legacy of Frederick Douglass in 2019, of which Mily Treviño-Sauceda was one. So I will confess, Mily did not want me to read all of those awards, but I did anyway, because I wanted those of you who may be less familiar with these issues and with this movement to know how incredibly lucky we are to have someone of this background and expertise and knowledge and passion with us today. So I'm going to turn over right now. Mily, I'd love for you to just say hi and tell us a little bit more about Alianza Nacional de Campesinas.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks. Oh, wow. This is an honor to be here, and to always be appreciative of helping us give visibility to farmworker women and the issues that farmworker women face. Alianza is an alliance. It's a national alliance of right now we have now 18 different member organizations and groups throughout 20 different states within the United States. And Alianza has worked entirely, all these organizations that we work with that are our members are truly grassroots organizations that work on the ground, that are that the majority, if not all, are, well, we're all women-led organizations to start with, and we know that the importance of building this national alliance was to support farmers women all along, for whatever kind of activism they are organizing to help their families, to help themselves, to make sure that their human rights are, respected. And why? Because we know there's a long history of marginalization, of abuse, of our communities, just because we are working in on the ground, touching the dirt uh, the whole day, and but people don't understand that being connected to the earth is who we are to start with. And of course, we were called essential workers only because we needed to continue working during the pandemic. But at the same time, our organization flourished, uh, pushing for visibility, not just to see us as essential workers, to continue working to make sure we were feeding the country and the world. Uh, in different ways, farmer women, we have been, we know that we have been invisibilized. But at the same time, we are helping each other. It's not just to show our faces, but to bring out what are the issues that are affecting our lives, what are the issues that are affecting our families and our neighborhoods, and in what way we can do create change together, because we have become resources in our communities, and within the states that we are representing. We are making a lot of change because we are professionals in what we do, and we know what is happening in our community, and we're the ones to know what needs to be changed. So there's a lot of things that we've been doing. We've been working with USDA at this point in time because of the pandemic. There were hearings happening in terms of in what way the communities in this country needed to get support. And we were one of the groups that wanted to make sure that we were also provided the assistance and the support that we needed, because we were still working in the fields. We were getting sick. We didn't have any health insurance. We didn't have sick time, and it was expected that we continue working. And of course, we lost a lot of people, a lot of families for the same reason, because we know what happened with COVID. At the same time, working with USDA, we were able to acquire some support from for the farm worker relief fund, which we are providing uh, funds to, and funds are not stimulus, they are reimbursements, because workers were not given equipment, the proper equipment or personal equipment to for them to take care of themselves while working. They were not, when they got sick, they were not paid, etc. And so we're still working with this, and we're very happy that USDA felt that we could be one of the 15 organizations to work around 20 different states to do this kind of work. And with the farm labor service program is another project that we're working with USDA. And the intent of us is to provide workers information about what their rights are, because if people don't know their rights, they have no idea that all this exploitation or wage theft that's happening, the lack of information is keeping them from really exercising what they need to do if something is wrong, and what is wrong, so, to start with. And we have been doing a lot of relationship building with USDA also. There's a farm worker coordinator position, and but we have been finding out that even though the farm worker coordinator wanted to support us as much as in this case she could, there were other commitments that the farm worker coordinator has as roles and responsibilities. And at the same time, we were able to connect with several offices within the USDA and have kept that connection with them on different things. We had a convening, a convivencia, as we call it, last year, and we were able to bring more than 130 Farmaco women, and the participants there joined, and we were invited to be at the USDA headquarters, and we were able to do all this kind of work. Uh, with them in terms of talking about what are our issues with the different departments that were invited by USDA to work with us. So anyway, so with the Farm Service Agency department, we also have been working. We've been getting webinars and getting information, and we have been giving them also input the same way we've been doing it with EPA in terms of, if you really want, get feedback from our communities, talk our language. Give us not only the opportunity to hear what you're speaking in English to our language, but to also, as we speak, you also hear us in a different way. So there's many different ways that we have been working with the different departments, especially USDA, EPA, and of course there's a lot of work that our organizations have been doing locally in their states. As I said, we're now 18 organizations, and it's a lot of work, and we've advanced in terms of pushing for um, protections for farm workers in our own states. As we know, the within the during the 1930s, when the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed, they did not include agricultural workers. What does that mean? That there's no protections. So there's no, unless there's a socially responsible company that feels that workers need to be treated with dignity and respect, then that, well, there are certain companies that do that, but many, they just have workers. They're more concerned about complying with and making sure that they have the demand that they need to provide a certain, whatever for them to be able to sell their products, and that's it. There's no protections. There's no many different things. No, only California is the only state that has full protections for farm workers. Several other states have some protections. There's no overtime for the majority of of uh, of the states. So there's so many things that we can talk about, how we are working with a different. We're also working with different organizations. So we're not doing it by ourselves. We're working with the different groups that have, provided us support when we needed to file lawsuits, like Earth Justice, when agencies are not, or the state or the government is not responding after, many conversations or proof of information is there, and we're not given the proper treatment, then we go ahead and have to file the lawsuit so we can get the attention that we need. not only Earth Justice, but Farm Worker Justice, all these other groups, Pesticide Action Network, the Center for Food and Safety, all these groups, Coming Clean, all these groups have also supported us and in our understanding of looking at the bigger picture. So as farm worker women, we know we are capable. We're very smart. We might have not in our times have not had the opportunity to go to school, but that doesn't mean that, I mean, being smart is something very different than having have acquired more information from when you go to school, in terms of getting a higher education or things like that. But
I mean,
there's so many other things to talk about, but I know you have
I
some
wanted
other
to
questions.
just touch on a few things because so I will say, like, I come out of ethnic studies. My training is in ethnic studies out of California,
That's right.
and when I used to teach about the modern labor movement, one of the things, in the contemporary labor movement, one of the things that we would teach was actually the history of líderes campesinas and the history of farm worker women organizing,
That's right.
because it is a model of the kind of feminist labor organizing that we see. And it is because in many ways it is so holistic and so intersectional. It is bringing together, as you were saying, even listing the organizations that Alianza has been partnering with. It is about climate justice, right? It is about reproductive justice. It is about gender justice and sexualized violence. It is about labor politics. And it is, doing all of these issues. It's about social service provision, educational access, and housing rights. And because it brings together this incredible group of women workers and organizers, it has really become a model, I think, of what my students would call intersectional organizing from the grassroots. And it is, I think, been remarkable, the kind of successes that have been seen.
Yes.
And the kind of work that has been possible, because we have to remember that in the same way, last month in August we were talking about how the US was built on Black farm labor, right? Unpaid
That's
often, and
That's
debt, peonage Black farm labor. What we also have to remember is that, since the end of the Civil War, through all the years of the Bracero program, through all of the years of farm labor expansion, that the US economy has relied on farm worker labor, and particularly Latino and Hispanic farm worker labor. And that a lot of that labor has been women's work. So the successes that you've had that you were talking about, one of the things that strikes me is that it's not just about, you're right, getting faces out there, but that you really, by emphasizing this, what your organizations, your member organizations have done is made it clear that there can be nothing without your expertise, without your voices, without your representation and listening to you. And I think that has been incredibly amazing. I will say that, you and I talked about the farm worker coordinator position, and I can't think of another labor force of this size that generates this level of income, of wealth for the US economy, where they would imagine that one position in something as large as the USDA was an adequate liaison or coordination position. Could you imagine them saying that the Department of Labor would have one person who ever talked to automakers and auto workers? It would be insane, right? We would never imagine it in any other industry. So we know there's so much more that is needed, and even with all the successes that you've had. And I know that Alianza Nacional de Campesinas created a list of policy recommendations for the Farm Bill for this year. And, I'm not going to go through all of them because I want to really, have a chance for you to talk about what you think is most important. But I know that, your policy demands have been everything from, about the farm worker coordinator position, about worker protections, about, supporting, doing research, but also about things that people are less aware of, things like funding rural development, things like supporting beginning farmers, because farm workers are experts on farming, about more research and more access to nutritional support through SNAP. So tell me more about what it is that Alianza and your member organizations are working toward in this Farm Bill cycle and why it's important.
You know, uh, I will share that. But before I do want to share. I always get excited in terms of talking and sharing all
I love it.
about Alianza. I do want to share that we do have four priority areas, like we were talking about, and the four priority areas were decided by the women that participate. The Farmaco Women. This is a Farmaco Women organization led by Farmaco Women and for Farmaco Women. It's like how we say this is that we work within the cultural context. Why do we say this? Is because we learned that in order for things to change, it'll make more sense for us if we engage and um, if we engage the women, and it's not about just getting engaged, it's about making the commitment and understanding what is going on in your community aside what's going on with me personally and my family. But things are going to get better if I also support what's going on in my community. Why? It's gonna be an effect, if I help myself, I help my families, I help my neighborhood, I help others, and I engage at the same time others. It's because we're a community. We come from a culture of community where we're always thinking and we've been raised, and that's part of our ancestry in terms of thinking that it's a community that the family is our community. It's basically whatever happens to me is also going to happen to our neighbors, everything else, and we know who is lives next door. We know who lives in front of who lives in our neighborhood, and we need to do that because it's about taking care of each other, supporting each other. And so, in terms of our four priority areas, as you were mentioning, the women, since 2013, we, as our first convivencia, and then we just had our fourth convivencia last year, and we're working on the next one. It's going to happen next year. Um, the four priority areas are related to what is violence against women, in what way women needed to make sure that in order for us to be, we have some sayings, and maybe you can help me in terms of translate that, but in Spanish it's called, you cannot be candil de la calle, oscuridad de tu casa, ¿verdad? Which is, you cannot be the light out there and have a lot of shading or shaming inside your home. You have to take care of your family. And how do I know I'm a good organizer? I organize my family, with my family, and my family supports not only what I do, but help me understand what is needed within a family. And every single one of us gets engaged and supporting others. No, well, anyway, so that's in terms of violence against women. The other is more related to what it is happening in the workplace. Labor issues, and of course, in terms of the violence against women, and gender-based violence in the workplace, uh, you know, if we talk reality, it's and if the Department of Justice really would understand, and the Department of Labor really would understand, the Women's Bureau would really understand that what we have been saying all along within our 30 some years organizing, that Farmaco Women, if you really review what is going on, it's 9 out of 10 women are sexually harassed by in the workplace. And 9 out of 10, it's a big number. It's a big number. And between 4 and 5 women out of 10 are raped. That's a lot. That's a big number. You were talking about numbers right at the beginning, and just try to multiply what is going on. And let me tell you, we know that the majority of the surveys or research that's been done in our communities is not complete because we still have thousands and thousands of people in hiding, and many companies are not paying their workers, uh, and because of the lack of protections, they're not paying them but by cash. They're paid cash, so they don't have to report. So how do you know? And how could those workers get unemployment? Where? What? And they will only provide unemployment if the company will be willing to do that. Anyway, so to your question, in terms of um, going to in terms of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the first time they invited farm workers to come and have an event was in 2012, 2013. I mean, we've existed ever since the agriculture has existed.
Mm-hmm.
2008 was the first time there was a pharmaco coordinator position. This pharmaco coordinator, the one of the first people that was hired was the granddaughter of Cesar Chavez,
Christine
Christine
Chavez,
Chavez.
right? Yeah.
Christine Chavez. Because of Christine Chavez and Julie Rodriguez, who are granddaughters of Cesar. And I call him that way because our family comes from a long history of understanding how important it was. My family worked in the state of Washington, where several of us were born there. Some were born in the state of Idaho. And what happened is that working in as children, because there's still children working in the fields, and it's allowed for farm workers to have, or farmers to have workers at the age of 12 still work in the fields. Okay, that's still allowed. You go to any other industry, they will not allow this. And this is so sad because then going back to USDA, yes, we're grateful that we are being invited, and we're grateful that we're given visibility and they're willing to work with us, but there's a lot more work to be done because one coordinator is not going to be enough. We know that even though this coordinator tries her best in this case to connect with us, she's got many other duties. Well, excuse me. I mean, they're supposed to be not only the coordinator to provide the support and connections here, but we are. This is why we're asking for the pharmaco coordinator to have an office and to have more pharmaco representation and have liaisons and have that work within that office so that there's more support, and so that USDA can really understand what are the issues, what is happening with these essential workers, that if they are healthy and they're treated with respect, they'll be more productive. And this is where if you're thinking about economy, well, think about, you're gonna best have um, better production if workers are healthy and are treated with respect and dignity. So for us working with if there is the possibility of liaisons, they can be working with us and connecting us more with EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, with the Department of Labor, with the Women's Bureau, with the Housing Assistant Council, or the Housing Urban Development. All these other agencies, even with the National migrant education or migrant, just in general, migrant, the bilingual education, all these different groups or agencies that are supposed to be there because it was proved it was needed. It's supposed to be there to provide the support. And if this coordinator has a full staffed office, they can help provide reports to the secretary, give them information, give information to Congress in terms of the progress of the work, and how much resources and how much we're also providing, the millions and billions and trillions of funds that this country is getting because of the kind of work we're doing in agriculture. So
I
there's a
love that.
lot more, but
No, I
you
love
have more
this.
questions for me.
I think, one of the things that I think is so amazing is the way that you talk about expanding the farm worker coordinator to being an office, is that it's not just about more service provision, more resources provided, but it's also so much about providing ways for there to be more liaisons to talk to farm workers, farm worker women, to bring their voices and their experiences and their direct needs and knowledge back to the government, back to the USDA. And I want to kind of especially take this to the question of what you were talking about in terms of, worker protections and about thinking about sexual and gender violence in the workplace and just the total lack of worker protections in general. So I want to ask a question that one of our viewers had, which is, what does full protection for farmers in California mean? Like, when we say that California has full protection, what does that really mean? Is it enough? And then for me, I would love for you to talk. You and I talked earlier about how the ways that farm worker communities have been excluded from the Farm Bill and from the USDA have led to this devaluing of human life, right? And have led to these multiple forms of exploitation, the lack of protection, the pesticide exposure, that sexual and gender violence, and the reproductive justice issues. But so what would it look like to have full protection? What does it look like now? And why is it so desperately needed?
Yes, when I talk, and thank you for that question, or those questions. Uh, when I'm talking about full protections, is the same protections that any other industry is providing workers, their workers, which is, you have. You have to get paid for all the work that you're doing. If you are complaining, or you're trying to organize the workers, so you are not the only one complaining about not getting fully paid. There's wage theft, or there's the health and safety issue. You can do that complaint. You cannot be fired. And if you are fired, then you can go to the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, which is the only state that has an office, and which has different, district offices within the state of California. What is needed? I mean, there's a California OSHA. California OSHA is for all industries, including farm workers, because California in the 1970s, when Governor Brown was involved, he was pressured to approve these kind of protections. And of course, it went as far as, workers needed to work more than 10 hours in order for them to get overtime, or over 60 hours to get overtime. And if you're working in the fields and you're working under, a holiday, you have to get overtime. And if companies are not doing that, they can file complaints. And but what is lacking here many times is for these agencies, these government agencies, to have full resources so they can have enough investigators to come in. It took us, in California, it took us close to 10 years in the 90s to to make sure that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commissioner, which is a federal agency, to really, give us the attention that we needed. And as that started happening, more women were, feeling that they had some kind of support and felt confident in terms of they that they had other women like us that knew that she was not alone and she was not the only one that this was happening to them. If they were for filing a complaint on sexual harassment and rape, which we have. Women enduring 6 years of rape, 3 years of rape, things. Why do they stay in that situation? Because some of them could be undocumented, or some of them because they're married. They're being threatened by the perpetrator or the person that's abusing her, and or people that are abusing them, telling them, they know where their family lives and they know if she's undocumented, or if men many times fear these supervisors or crew leaders, much more women, and agriculture is so isolated, far away. So it's very easy to abuse. And so for here, what we know is we need to make sure going to the farm bill, going in there, we need to make sure that we have really support where when there's disasters, like when the pandemic, you know, it, it started coming after, real after many people had died, that some type of support was coming in. It's not enough. But when hurricanes and these kind of disasters happen, farm workers are without a job, and if they don't have documents, how they can't get unemployment, they cannot get any other kind of resource, and sometimes they can't even get any nutritious food, because for them is, they're gonna buy whatever they can get. And sometimes they live in so far away from supermarkets where food could be much cheaper, but the majority of the time, workers are trying to just survive it. It's so hard for them. And what I want to add is that, for example, in the exclusion and lack of access to nutritious food is what I was just talking about. How we don't know, it's so interesting. We are the ones that are, working the plants, harvesting the fruits and vegetables, and we don't have, access to nutritious food, and we don't have access to safe housing, and we still don't have enough child care systems that can help and be there to support during the time that we start work, which is we're required to start work at 5:30 in the morning, and sometimes we have to, by the time we get home or pick up our children, it's 7 p.m. So, I mean, these kind of systems are not helping at all. There's kind of like this SNAP, assistance, but it's not enough for what is needed in terms of for our families. The majority of farm workers, not being citizens, are restricted in terms of being able, because of immigration issues or status. They feel, and the past administration was very good in terms of scaring workers, in terms of not getting any kind of support whatsoever, even if people were dying. I mean, not getting any kind of support, and this is one of them, which people needed to decide: am I going to be able to pay the rent, or am I going to be able to feed my child or my children? I mean, if you're in that situation, what is that telling us, society? This country claims that it's got the best, it's the power of the whole world. Well, treat your residents, eh, with respect. That's what we need. In terms of the housing issues, not only the housing issues are very unsafe, um, and many more times because uh, the rents or the payments or the loans are so high. Many families have to live together. They have to live in very crowded situations, and many farm workers also are still, complaining of what is going on with the heat stress. There's so much that's going on. We really want, Cal OSHA to really hear us, how important it is for us that are working out there, being exposed to not only the sun, the dirt, and the hard labor that we need. We need to rest. We need water, and we need shade, and we need to be treated with dignity. And in terms of I already said the child care, it should be better designed for us, so that they can also treat and help our children maintain their culture, in terms of our language and in terms of our customs and our traditions. All this is so important for us. Many more times we're affected, and many schools are so close still uh, to or there's a lot of agriculture around,
Mhm.
and all these pesticides are being sprayed. And while our children are out there, not only in when they're having recess, but just, pesticides are pesticides.
Mhm.
The drift will go, and will harm. And um, there's been so much research about how much damage the use, and especially the misuse, but the use of pesticides has caused so much harm to women
Mhm.
within our reproductive system, and our children that are being born with defects. And in terms of being a norm of normalities, or our special needs, or children that start getting health issues because they're close to these agricultural fields, because companies have been trained that in order for them to succeed, they have to use pesticides.
And this,
And we have proven that we don't need to use so many pesticides. There's trillions of tons of pesticides that are being used on an annual basis in all throughout the country, which is
I think
very
this
sad.
is so crucial because this gets back to, you were talking about the four kind of areas that las mujeres have identified, that the women have identified. And we talked about, worker protections, and we talked about, sexual and gender violence and harassment. And then you really just got to a third one of the sort of question of
Mhm.
pesticides. And I think this is so important for people to understand that for, the coalition that is Alianza, the question of pesticides and the question of how it impacts the soil, how it impacts our rural communities, how it impacts reproductive health, the workers who are farming, is such a huge, huge issue. And you all have done incredible organizing around this. And then you also did such, you brought up the question of the heat and the natural disasters. And to me, that seems like such a no brainer for why Alianza Nacional has been so active around questions of climate, because farm workers are on the front lines of experiencing the impact of climate change every single day and are excluded from those protections and those forms of aid that other folks are getting in this era of increasing natural disasters and increasing heat in the workplace. So tell me a little bit more, Mily. We have to wrap up very soon, but I really want to hear you talk a little bit about how, you and the women organizations that you've been working with and the women workers are thinking about the role of working against pesticides, of working around climate as important issues for farm workers in general and farm worker women and children in particular.
You know, uh, as farm worker women, we have been working a lot in terms of um, uh, the pesticides that have created so much damage in our bodies, in our families, bodies, and in general in health. And we know that by us understanding what are the chemicals that are being being sprayed in the fields will give us a better idea of how we can provide information for our communities so they can protect themselves. But really, you start questioning, really giving workers information is not enough. It's giving them the confidence that they will be uh, given the treatment and the assistance that they need, and that they're not gonna be retaliated against, is so important for workers. Workers have to decide either to take whatever kind of exploitation because they need to continue um, you know supporting their families, because you know families, it's how can I say this, how would you feel that when you go to the refrigerator and you see that there's not much there for you to feed your children, and then you have to go and endure all these kind of abuse, and your thinking is, "Hey, I need to keep working, I need to keep sustaining, but if if I am gonna do something to create change, I need not to be alone. I need to not be the only one, and I need for the agencies, state agencies, and law enforcement to be there to respond in a very respectful way, because being law enforcement doesn't mean that you already know how to protect and enforce in the right way, because we've also had all that too in terms of us needing to train law enforcement in especially in California. We've been doing that a lot more because we have found that if they do not understand our culture, they will not understand how important it is for them to treat us as human beings. It's all of that. So all these we don't have, of course, health protections, we don't have labor protections, we don't have benefits. So how can we make sure that people don't have to be deciding either to continue the abuse because they have to sustain the family? They don't, we don't want women especially to keep being raped just because they that's the only way that she's gonna continue being having a job. That's very unfair. That's very unfair. All these situations, when you go to the supermarket, you only see, the whole row, the whole space there for all the fruits and vegetables. But do you see, where they're coming from? You know, what people have to endure? Long hours of work and then no work at all, because that's what the seasons are, you know? You could get a lot of money during that time, and it could be like 5 6 weeks, but then you're 3 months without a job. All these, but you're enduring it, you're trying to find, and our people do try to find ways to survive. They make tamales, they make food, they try to sell that so that they can continue sustaining their families, especially women. So all these kind of experiences are experiences that we know will can end, and they will be little by little be ending, because that if you are a good organizer, you know that things don't happen from one day to another or from one year to another. It takes time, but we need to be constant. We need to make sure that we are good organizers. We are very patient in terms of how things, and we need to invest time and effort in terms of making sure that you're providing that kind of support and making sure that the agencies and the centers that are there to provide the support um, are uh, are working within the cultural context of our communities. Because if they're not, it's not going to help. It's not going to build the trust for people to be able to come to them, and they need to be out there like we are, understanding what's going on and living it, so that they can hear what our communities need. So there's a lot more to share, but I know we have very little time,
Yeah.
and I get very passionate, so I talk
Me
about a
too.
lot of things.
I confess, I could talk to you about this all day, but I do know we have to let people go. We need to let you go because I know your time is limited. But I think we scheduled this one for last of our series, and I will confess I did it on purpose because I think that the way that you talk, Mily, and the way that Alianza Nacional de Campesinas and your member organizations and the women workers who have been doing this organizing for decades, the way that you understand farm worker organizing and agricultural and rural community organizing speaks to everything that ARPC and our partner organizations and our partners in the movement, whether our funder pact or the transformational, farm folks, we know that when we talk about farm worker justice, we are talking about climate justice. We are talking about labor justice. We are talking about farm justice. We are talking about gender justice. We are talking about reproductive justice. And that we cannot think about anything about the Farm Bill and about U.S. agricultural policy without thinking about the work of farm workers and the experiences and how incredibly important it is that we think about all of these issues as central to our U.S. agricultural system. So I want to thank you so much for the time you've spent with us. Folks who are watching this live right now, please, it's going to go up as a reel in just about a week, and we will be getting some links from Mily and Alianza Nacional to their organization, to their different statements and their campaigns and their projects that you can support them. We want to encourage you to be as active as possible. This is the moment to try to push for the Farm Bill to include farm workers. Just because they're invisible in the Farm Bill does not mean that they are not crucial to everything about farms. And we want to make sure that you all tune in also next Tuesday. No, it's not even next week. On the 18th, as we continue this conversation and talk about what comes next. Thank you so much, Mily Treviño-Sauceda. Thank you so much. We are so grateful. Please, Treviño-Sauceda. I am so sorry. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for allowing me to share my passion. And there's so many people that have been supportive in terms of providing funds and providing food during our time, like Food Forward and Polo's Pantry, Baby to Baby, all these different groups that are making a lot of difference and that learn that we are resourceful and that we are connected to our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Un
Bye bye.
abrazo.
Oh, abrazos, abrazos.